Welcome, welcome, welcome to the living room where we listen, learn, and live together. I'm your host, Richard Martin. Glad you're here. Make yourself right at home. I'm glad to have one of my best friends in life, indeed, my brother from another mother, here with me today. I want you to take a good look at him. I have a sneaky suspicion that you'll be seeing more of him. As you all know, for about 3 weeks now, 3 weeks out of our second season, I have gone live all by myself, just having one-on-one discussions with you, and in between dropping some interview style podcasts for you to enjoy and learn from. And I've enjoyed myself in large part due to my friend, my brother's inspiration and accountability to say, hey, you're strengthening yourself on the interview side. Won't you practice developing your ability to communicate by yourself? Now, many of you all know I'm a pastor, and what comes with that is speaking, preaching, teaching, but the podcast space can be a little different. And so today I've got my boy with me who's going to help me kind of think out loud, and it won't be one dimensional. He'll have an opportunity to share as well. It won't take you long to figure out that he is an educated brother whose thoughts do not just remain on the surface, but he has a way of kind of going deep into the inner sanctums of his own mind and heart to kind of bring out some insightful thoughts. And today's conversation is going to demand that. Another biographical nugget. We had the chance to share a room together in college. Definitely one of my best roommates. Had the privilege of having 4 great roommates, so there isn't much competition there, but definitely one of my best memories was sharing a room together. I believe it was our sophomore year in college. And so please welcome to the living room, my brother, Dr. DeShawn Preston. What's up, man?
Rich, what's going on, man? Thank you for having me. I must say that when you invited me, and as people will watch, they'll learn a little later, I thought that this would be a little bit more lighthearted of a conversation that we would have. As people who kind of dialogue on a weekly basis and can almost talk about anything, I thought you would have me come in and talk about sports, talk about just life, being a husband, working, the whole nine. But honored that you have brought me on to have this particular conversation. You're gonna make me reach into a deep place that I don't often go to or necessarily express a lot, but I'm always in constant thought about. So thank you. This ought to be interesting, to say the least.
Most definitely. And to be honest, I actually thought the same, that as we've reflected on past conversations, whether on the podcast or just in life, like you said, it would have been very logical or intuitive that our first time together or first few times together, just kind of shooting the breeze, would be on, maybe some things that were a little bit more inconsequential, but just fun to talk about. But man, the past several weeks, months, maybe even the better part of this pandemic season, and then of course, as we'll see beyond that, it's just been kind of a lot of deep breathing, deep inhales, deep exhales for the nation, for the Black and brown community, for Black males. And as we're seeing, it's no longer just Black males. It's just Black teenagers, boy, girl. And we're not acting as though today that there aren't any other concerns outside of the Black community. But we want to be clear that today a large part of our conversation will speak to that. And even in a more focused sense, the relationship between law enforcement and the Black community. Now, we want to be very upfront and just put it on the table that we understand that this subject matter can be triggering. So if you feel the need to say, maybe not today, I was actually looking forward to, talking about sports, come back another week. Or maybe you can revisit this podcast when you're in a healthier mental, emotional space. No judgment whatsoever. In fact, before we went live, DeShawn and I were actually saying that we have to choose our spots when it comes to talking, listening, viewing, engaging this subject matter. And so please believe, we want to let you know upfront that if you're driving, you're going to an interview, you've got a test to take or something else, and you're just like, I'm about to go to sleep. I don't need to go to sleep with any of this on my mind. Hey, go to sleep. Watch you a good YouTube comedy video, and that's all well and good. But if you do want to track with us, we want you to be very open and feel free to drop some comments. We do want to have an expanded, diverse conversation. I'm sure you will begin to hear us share certain views. And DeShawn and I talk a lot about a lot. And we don't always see eye to eye. And I've always benefited from DeShawn's perspective from the time we were just young bucks in college to help me turn the dime in, allow some light to shine through a different pane and expand and broaden my understanding. And that's what we do here in the living room. So we're going to take a subject that is meaningful to us. It is sensitive. But if we can't have sensitive conversations, then maybe we need to rethink having conversations in general. So let's get into it. DeShawn, last week, April 20th, many people are calling it a historic day in American history. Were you able to watch the verdict delivered in the George Floyd case towards former officer Derek Chauvin?
I watched it, but with hesitancy. Mm-hmm. If I'm being honest with you, I almost didn't watch it. I knew it was coming on. I knew it was on. I got the notification on my phone from CNN and all of the news outlets where it was really important. And even as a sports fanatic, right, there were even a lot of the sports stations even gave you notifications for fear that they might have to cancel some games or do a number of things. And if I'm being honest, right, from a historical standpoint, life would tell you that the verdict would go one way. And I knew I would not be able to handle it if he was not found guilty. And because I knew I would not be able to handle it, I wasn't sure if I wanted to watch. It took some soul searching, some prayer, some just, I don't know, some courage, honestly, right? And I said, all right, I'm gonna watch this. And I watched it, and the whole time I was nervous, I was fearful. And if I'm even being honest, even afterwards, I still, a lot of people say, I blew a sigh of relief. I felt great. I don't necessarily know if I felt great or a sigh of relief. One, because you know me, I don't believe in giving credit for something that you should do. Two, the unfortunate truth is I know that this was an exception to the rule. This was an anomaly. And I realize also that even after this case, that there will probably still be more that do not go in the same favor that I wanted to, or even a lot of people who saw the video wanted it to go. So I watched it, but it was a rough watch.
Yeah. And I appreciate that honesty and that transparency because, man, I can relate completely. In fact, I did not keep track with the case live. Every day it was presented and I would see it on a number of channels, but I chose intentionally not to watch it. I might still be a little bit traumatized by the prolonged election season from last year that went a lot longer than it normally did. And I was like, you know what? I just can't right now. You know me, I'm in school. I've got other things that demand both my mental, emotional, and just chronological bandwidth. And I can't reserve it for this. Not hopeless, but choosing to be hopeful in as disconnected way as possible. So I didn't even know, to be completely honest, that the verdict was due to be released. My mom reached out to me and said, what do you think is going to happen? And I was like, what are you talking about? And so once she caught me up, I was like, oh, okay, well, I'm actually just going to wait and see. Like, I don't really have an optimistic view that says, oh, he definitely will get this. And I can't say that I was pessimistic. I think for me, I was just trying to be mindful, like you said, about history and what history has proven. And then also just kind of holding my breath a bit because, and you said it, man, and when you said it, it just hit me. Like, I don't know. I didn't want to set myself up because I already knew, man, if this thing goes the opposite way and he is found not guilty on one or all of them, I was quite apprehensive about what that would mean for the nation. And, we already saw uprisings and maybe that's too heavy of a word, but I'll use it. Uprisings, marches, different kinds of protesting when the pandemic restrictions were very strong. Yeah. And now that they're lighter, I'm like, yo, if this thing goes left, I don't know what is going to happen. And I didn't want that. I didn't want to witness that. So I actually took care of some chores around the house, trying to occupy myself. And it just so happened that the timing was when I was done with those, the jury was coming back into the room. And so I sat there and I was just kind of watching it. And then as he read all three, it was like, wow, this is crazy. And I still don't think I was able to put it in proper perspective until I started to see those from various generations, who had seen your Rodney King incidents and scores of others. I mean, I think we were reminded of Trayvon Martin and George Zimmerman and other incidents, whether it included law enforcement or not, where, like you said, this is a song we've heard before. And for it to kind of have a different tune for once in a while was like, wow. And yet there was that ... So I definitely agree with you. Still yet to be seen what the sentencing will be. That's another component. Will the sentencing correspond to the verdict?
Yeah. And it's, you mentioned something, right? And I'll say this and kind of leave it alone. I did not watch the trial either, right? And one of the main reasons why I didn't watch the trial is because far too often when these cases like police shootings or a killing of a black body is on trial, oftentimes it's the deceased that tend to be on trial and not the person who pulled the trigger, right?
Yeah.
So even and I didn't watch it, but I did like read. I get a New York Times. They have like these little brief updates that they kind of tell you about the world. And every day I would read it, and every day they were. So what is George Floyd like? What is he doing? It's like, well, what about the guy who was shooting?
Yeah.
Like, I thought he was on track. George Floyd is dead. He can't defend himself. He's not around to have this conversation. He's dead.
Yeah.
Okay. And too often the black men are on trial. Black men and women are on trial, and I'm saying their death isn't enough. Like, why is it that we have to go in someone's past to try to justify why they're dead when we already know whatever led up to it never justified their death?
Yeah. Yeah. It's so true, man. And I think, as much as we were reserved and cautious and had a moment of, and I joined with people. In fact, I talked about it a bit Friday night, the following Friday night, that is, after the verdict was rendered. I talked about it a bit with my church during Vespers, just saying, a lot of people are saying justice feels good, finally. And I agreed with that. I said, it does feel good. But if I had to be completely honest, it wasn't like the kind of feel good that you have after you have a nice bowl of ice cream. It was kind of like the feel good that you have after you've gone to the dentist and had some work that was necessary done. But, the pain was still there. And it was kind of one of those, it had to happen. But I'm not trying to necessarily go through this again just for this good feeling. That's my point. Like, ice cream feels good and I'm wanting to go tomorrow. After I leave the dentist's office, all right, I'll see you in 6. I'll see you when I see you, you know what I'm saying? And I'll maintain. I don't want more people to lose their lives just to have more persons rightfully, to have a verdict come back that corresponds to the crime. Like, no, I don't want that good feeling. I actually think that there needs to be a lot more done so that we don't have to keep coming to these situations, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. A matter of fact, right, I think, and funny, as you were talking and as I was thinking, right, I know why I did not feel some form of jubilation right after it was done. And it was because ultimately, I don't know, and I still continue to question how much of it was justice being served or how much of it was America saving face, right? Because we had to think about it from this standpoint, right? Everybody, because the pandemic had happened, so everybody in the world saw, right?
Yeah.
There were protests everywhere. right? All around France, you name it,
Mm-hmm.
Germany, London. They were all over. Australia, and so America historically hates to be embarrassed.
Yeah.
You know, Americans, we like to be in everybody else's business. We like
Mm-hmm.
to tell them how to run their country, what democracy should look like, what equality should look like. And I mean, we fought wars over it. Vietnam is a great example, right?
Mm-hmm.
What and World War II and all of the above, right? And take it from a historical standpoint. What made America start to give in to a lot of civil rights was just that. Hosing kids and all of the above and it being on national television and embarrassing yourself will make you say, okay, telling people communism is wrong
Yeah.
and all of the above, but you have Jim Crow laws and you have, all of these other laws in place. After a while, the finger comes pointed back at you, and America hates that. And part of me really felt like, if I'm being honest, like in my hearts of hearts, right, that justice wasn't really served. It was
Yeah.
more so America saying, we will put on blast for the world to see. And there's absolutely no way we can embarrass ourselves by allowing this man to get off.
Yeah.
Because then the rest of the world would know that what black people have been saying for centuries is true.
Yeah.
Because I think too many times, right, about even other black people. I'm talking about like Africans and people from the Caribbeans and just other ethnic groups that live in other countries. They have this perception of black people because of what the news and the media portrays.
Sure.
But had he come back innocent, I think that portrayal from other countries would have changed. I'm like, man, maybe black people in America are onto something. Maybe
Yeah.
they're not lying when they say, we're treated a certain way or we're put in these type. And so I'm somewhere in between. Like, was it justice or was it I don't want to embarrass myself? So
Yeah.
let me do the right thing this one time. And that I think that constantly eats at me and something I'm constantly trying to. I don't want to be cynical, but I also want to be realistic and kind of say, well, I don't, because to that extent, with Miss Bryant happened the same day.
Same day. Yeah.
And even on that same day, you still have a number of people who are justifying why she should have been shot.
Right. Right. And that was the thing, Press. Like, and before I respond to that, I just want everyone to know that, DeShawn is speaking more than just from like, I sit on my couch and I reflect. Like, he is a trained, educated historian, and a trained educationalist. So he's bringing to the table now, a manner of thinking that is a little bit deeper. So I just want to put that out there. Not that he needs that to say what he's saying, but I want you to know that. So with Ma'Khia Bryant, I think that was it, right, DeShawn? Like, we didn't even have time to celebrate. I don't know if celebrate's the word because I don't want to be light with that word, but like we didn't really have a time to reflect in a celebratory, just okay, let's just kind of bracket this. It was like, are you serious? Shaun King. I mean, I checked out his page later on that day, and he was just like, I can't believe this. I make a post to say, boom, 3 guilty verdicts. And the next post, or one of the next posts I have to make, is in Columbus, Ohio, 16-year-old girl, right? And so I think this is, again, to your point about the reality of America. And I agree that I think we ought to speak about it in more terms than just Black America. I do think it is definitely that. But sometimes that can be a cop-out, right? Like, for if that is in the wrong mouth, that is. Like, some people will say, oh, that's just Black America. No, this is an American issue, right? This is an American issue that enjoins many people. And so for this to be able to happen, there's a problem. Let's take a few steps back to come back forward. What was your upbringing like when it comes to, I guess, the training that you got in terms of that was caught and that was taught in terms of how to interact with or not interact with law enforcement growing up? What did you catch and what were you taught?
Yeah, that's interesting, right? So to give some context, I was born and raised in the suburbs of Atlanta, right? Mm-hmm. And I mean, since I've been alive, Atlanta has been considered essentially the black mecca of the South.
Yeah.
And not to say, right, that Atlanta is void of any police issues, void of profiling, things of that nature. But I might argue that it is a bit more progressive than a lot of other places, just because one, a lot of the cops that you interact with are African American or black, and just because it's just a place where it's understood that nice neighborhoods are going to be nothing but black people.
Yeah.
Who are well off. And so some of those things you don't, but at the same time, I live in the South, and I have interacted, and I'm not a person who stays in Atlanta, right? And so we go outside of Atlanta in different parts of Georgia and different parts of Tennessee, and we go to Alabama and different parts of Florida. And my father's from South Carolina. So we would go to South Carolina to visit family. And so from a very, very early age, my parents made it very clear to me, and they let me know, like, son, you are not right, because I'm like 6'3". And I've always been bigger than the vast majority of the kids that were my age. So one, it was like, a son, you might be 12 or you might be 10, but people who are not black aren't going to see you that way.
Sure.
Right. And because you're black, certain things might, people might perceive you a certain way. People might follow you when you're in the store. So, keep certain things, always, yes, sir, no, sir, no, sir. Yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. Make contact, eye contact, shake your hands. I can't even remember, man, this one time growing up, went to the store, bought something simple, man. I mean, simple, Rich. It probably was like a piece of candy or something.
Yeah.
Came out and I didn't have the receipt. My dad looked at me and said, "Where's the receipt, son?" I said, I didn't need it. I said, this piece of candy. I was like, I was eating it on the way out.
Right.
I said, no, sir. He said, no, sir. Don't ever walk out of a store without a receipt. And for the life of me, it made absolutely no sense.
Yeah.
I'm like, man, I'm eating the food as I'm walking out. Like, why do I need a receipt for something I'm just going to ball up and throw away, right? He's like, nah, you don't get it, son. He said, because of who you are, you never know, somebody might stop you and think you stole that just because of who you are.
Yep.
And he was like, and that receipt might be the difference between, them letting you go when you walk into your car, or you ended up in the backseat of a car waiting on them to call me to come and get you. And even to this day, man, now give me the receipt. Let me put it in my pocket. It can be something $2 worth. No, yeah. I'll take the receipt. It just is. Thank you. I'll throw it away when I get out or when I get home, right? And then, of course, just regular conversations. When I got my license, son, when you get in the car, turn down your radio, put both hands on the steering wheel, make eye contact. When they tell you to get your wallet, when they tell you, show me license and registration, you just don't go happily reaching for it. You say, officer, my wallet is in my back pocket. May I please go and reach and get it? And then you get it, And when they ask for your registration, officer, my registration is in the glove compartment. May I please get my registration? And for me, right, that's all I know. That's all I know how to interact with cops. That's what I've been taught. That's what I've been trained. When I have children, that's how I would train my children. And I will never, ever deviate from that, because one thing my father told me was, son, I don't care how bad they treat you. Live to fight it and live to see another day. I would rather you be disrespected and you end up in jail and we can go and fight than to have me go identify you, your body. And I realized, right, several things. One, that comes from a place of privilege for me.
Yeah.
I'm not ignorant enough to realize that because one, my parents taught me that. Everybody's parents aren't teaching them that. Two, I am, I don't even want to say well off. I have enough resources, and because my father's a pastor, I'm connected to enough people to if I end up in court or if I end up in a situation like that, I probably have somebody who can fight for me to get a minimal sentence, or
Sure.
because a lot of the justice system is really about how much money you have to get a good lawyer to fight your way out, not necessarily whether you're wrong or right.
Right.
And so I realized that, hey, I can fight another day. There are a lot of people we say, oh, maybe they should just live to fight another day. They'll never make it to another day because even if they're innocent, they're going to end up behind bars and probably spend a whole lot more time than they should or
Yeah.
life in prison just because they don't have the resources for it.
Yeah. It's true. It's true. And I often find that there are times where it can be difficult to couple the word privilege with anyone who is Black, and let alone Black males. But I think we, not just you and me, but we as a people are aware enough to know that privilege is not monolithic. It's not just only one person, one people group, that there are varying degrees of privilege in sub communities. There's the privilege of, yes, a dominant culture and a dominant avatar. Like in America, I think it is pretty much agreed upon that the most privileged avatar is a white male, right? In terms of just the kind of privilege that is just inherited, right? Like you can't help it. You didn't have anything to do with you being born white than I did with me being born Black. And so there are certain things come with it. Just like being Black, I didn't go out there knocking on people's doors and say, hey, yo, target me. It just kind of comes with it, right? But even being Black in the Black community, I must understand that I might have a level of privilege over against my Black sisters that I need to be mindful of. That if I'm not mindful of, I could be complicit in certain expressions of oppression, and I don't even know it, right? Same thing when it comes to just the socioeconomic privileges that come, even just the privilege and the blessing of having two parents in the home, right? You and I were able to have that experience. We had a mother and a father to kind of show us the ropes. And like you, man, there were definitely things. It was just funny as you were sharing your story. Same with me, just stuff that didn't register right away. For me, it was in addition to the receipt, their focus was on the bag. Hey, do you need a bag for this? And and they're like, no. Yes, get a bag, right? And I'm like, oh, I can hold it in my hand. It's like, no, so can people who steal. You need to put this in a bag, right? If it's cheese, if it's a candy bar, And man, Press, here we are, grown men, and you know what? I still do that. I'm like, yes, I'll take a bag because it's the perception, it's the look of it all. I think that you and I both know the feelings of being profiled, and whether that was aggressive profiling or just distant profiling. And we can detect sometimes when it's ignorance. This person just doesn't know. We're tall, Black men. When I'm rocking my beard look, that can kind of come with a certain perception. And there are times where it's forgivable, and then there are times where you just wonder, you say to yourself, man, like, really? Like, are you really following me right now? Like, there are 1,000 people in this store and you had to be intentional to follow me. So that's my next question. After the training, the things that were said to you specifically, and then the things that you just kind of caught, whether it was in the barbershop, in the church environment, at the barbecue, at the family reunion, you kind of hear, certain law enforcement referred to as the man, or people tell their war stories. I remember one incident where my mother kind of used this certain incident as a teaching moment. And it was very tragic. There was a couple of young teenagers. I was probably single digits, maybe 10, and some teenage boys. I think they might have had a stolen car or had some paraphernalia in their car. And when the police were going to pull them over, instead of stopping, they were trying to, outrun the police, as it were. And the police fired into the car. One of them died. And so my mom said, son, if you're ever pulled over, don't have a license yet. I'm not drivable. I can't drive yet. But she's saying, if you ever pulled over, whether you think you're right or wrong, listen. Same thing that your parents taught you. 10 and 2, eye contact, mannerable speaking. And at that age, I think she was just planting seeds, knowing you're not going to get this right now, but you're going to have to understand it later. She shared some stories about my dad and when they were courting as a young couple and being pulled over and just saying to us, the treatment won't always be fair, but your life is more important, right? Come home, allow us to be able to get you back safely. So in your experience, have you been pulled over? Have you had to put that into practice, or up until this point in your life, has it been like, nah, it's still kind of theory for me? Or have you had like, nah, Rich, unfortunately, I've been in those situations?
Yeah. Honestly, I don't know any black man that's been driving for more than 5 years that's never been pulled over.
Mercy.
I don't know if that's good or bad. I mean, honestly, I don't. I just really don't. For whatever reason, they've been pulled over for something, even if it wasn't real. It was one time in particular that comes to mind that scared the living daylights out of me, Rich.
Yeah.
I was driving home from Oakwood, and I was moving. It was like towards the end of the year. And so, I mean, I live in Atlanta, Oakwood. I mean, from Huntsville, it takes you about what, 3.5, 4 hours.
Right.
And I like to take 72 for several reasons. One, it's more highway. Two, once you get through Chattanooga and come back down 75, there's a Nike outlet, and I like to stop at the Nike outlet and the Polo outlet in Calhoun.
Right.
So I was driving through Scottsdale, Alabama. And if you know anything about history, there's an incident with about I think 6 boys in Scottsdale, and they were pretty much just look it up.
Yeah.
Anyways, I got pulled over in Scottsdale, so that was one. Already scared. And because I had so much stuff in my car was sitting a little lower because I was driving a Toyota Corolla about
right.
It was a 2000 and I don't even know what year it was. Maybe
I forgot about that car.
Yeah, a little car, white.
Yeah.
And I was taking a lot of stuff, so it was sitting low. Cop pulled me over, man, and he pulls up, takes his time. I think he had to run my tags because it took him too long to come to the car. So when he gets to the car, he actually, and I don't even know if I've ever told you this story. I don't think I've told too many people this story. Anyways, he gets to the car. We're in the middle of the day. It's the middle of the day, man. It's the middle of the day. Has his flashlight in one hand.
Wow.
Has his gun, has his hand on his gun. And he doesn't walk up to my window. He actually stays towards the back. And he looks in my car with the flashlight, just looking in the car to see what he can see. He doesn't even technically, still doesn't come up to the window. He lets down the window, asks for my license and registration. By this time, music down is off. 10 and 2, all of the above. You know, I went through the procedures that I was taught. Hey, my license is in my pocket. Can I get it? Yeah. Registration here. Can I get it? Yeah. Give him all my information. Goes back to his car. Runs my license. Runs my registration. He had me sitting there for about 45 minutes to an hour. Comes back and says, I'm going to let you go. Your tent was too dark, but I can't give you a ticket because your car is registered in Georgia.
Wow.
And all I could think to myself was, oh, I left something out. He asked me, actually, before he gave my license and registrations, hey, where you headed? What you doing? I said, I'm just coming home from college. I'm just going to drop some stuff off, da-da-da, live in Atlanta, da-da-da. So he comes back, and when he gives it to me and lets me go, I actually sit in my car for a little bit. I screamed, I cried, and I prayed. And I think I rode the rest of that 3 hours because it was about by that point I was at least 45 minutes into my drive. I rode the rest of the 3 hours in silence, I think.
Yeah.
Because the thing was, you ran my tag. My tags were already in Georgia. So you knew, yeah. My license was in Georgia. So you knew you couldn't give me a ticket for a tent. And my tent was also, it wasn't an illegal tent because my dad tinted the windows. And I mean, let's be realistic, right? Once again, I'm from Georgia, certain things, you're taught certain things.
Yep.
I'm not going to tint my windows too dark just because that's a sign to get pulled over. You know, you're going to tint the windows dark enough so that heat doesn't just come in and make your car too hot and things of that nature. But other than that, it was going to be all right. But I think, man, had I not had the proper training, I probably would have went to jail that day. I wholeheartedly believe it. But because of the amount of things he did to tell me that he could not give me a ticket, in my heart of hearts, and you can't, I promise you can't convince me any differently. He was looking for something.
Yeah.
And I think far too often, right? And I'm not saying it's right. As a matter of fact, it's inherently wrong. Sometimes a lot of officers are looking for something. And when we're not, and honestly, man, some people have a bad day and they're just not in the mood to be dealt with an officer. Or, you know, they're not taught, hey, when you talk, you know, because I know a lot of black people who are just, they were born loud, right?
Yeah.
And so to a white officer or somebody who hasn't been around black people, they think, why you getting loud with me? Why you raising your voice? They're talking in their regular voice. They just loud, okay? And I think, man, right, for black people, that's the scary part is I had to be flawless in order for me to make it out of that situation alive.
Yeah.
And sometimes black people don't get the leeway to not be flawless. Right? You have to do everything to the T. And the unfortunate truth is history is even proving that sometimes you can do everything to the T and it'll still go wrong, right? Henry Louis Gates is a prime example. He's just going into his house and the police stopped him, okay? So even that theory or myth or philosophy, whatever you want to call it, has been debunked by police officers in many cases. But I mean, you can't do anything wrong, man. You can't mess up. You can't have a slip up. And I thank God I didn't have a slip up in that incident because, you know, I'm not going to go to the extreme and say, Rich, he would have killed me. But I think I would have been I would have been detained or something. He was looking.
Yeah.
And I was blessed enough to have my composure to kind of know, don't give him anything.
I think that's a part of the psychological weight of it all is that these incidents, and I've been pulled over as well. There have been times where I was pulled over and yes, I was speeding, but I wasn't speeding because I was black. Young teenage boys tend to speed more than we ought to. In fact, people in general. And then there were times where I, like you, I know that I was pulled over and it wasn't because I was speeding. And both my knowledge of my speed, my knowledge that there's nothing in my vehicle. I have a black Toyota Corolla. The same. And I remember getting my windows tinted and I wanted a darker tint. And my parents unequivocally, they were like, no, you will get a tint that is sufficient for the job. But this isn't style, my brother. like that's not the game we're playing. I know that they could see in my car. They probably saw that I was black. One guy came and was just like, I mean, I don't know how he would have seen this. He was like, you didn't have your seatbelt on. And I was like, officer, yes, sir, I did have my seatbelt on. He says, no, I saw you as you were driving by, you're putting on your seatbelt. And I was kind of like, this isn't shaping up in my mind, right? But the tone of voice, you know, it was very provoking, almost trying to elicit some kind of reaction out of me. But my point is, the psychological weight is we are trained on tactics to make it out of a situation alive for a situation that doesn't happen most days out of the year. That's the thing. Like we can go years without getting pulled over, but we still have to keep that in mind. Like, we don't have the luxury of saying, man, what was I supposed to do when this happens? Am I supposed to hold? Like, was it ask them first? Like, no, you have to have this thing on lock, because at any given moment, you could be in the wrong place. You could be the right place, right? Like you said, someone might have a bad day. I mean, you know, it is already documented that there are instances where people have been pulled over to make quotas. Like, all these things are not all fair, right? We know that. But from a psychological standpoint, man, that thing can kind of cause us to have a certain spoken and unspoken relationship with law enforcement that kind of it leads us to walk circumspectly, you know, to be, to use a biblical term, wise as serpents, harmless as doves. You know, I am not saying that every single law enforcement agent is corrupt or, you know, has a bad rap. That would be highly ignorant. And I don't think anyone takes us to say that. You and I have actual friends. This isn't a metaphor. We actually have friends who are law enforcement agents. But my question is, and if you want to say something before you answer this question, that's fine. Would you say that you are afraid of police officers?
That's a tough question. And I'm trying to even figure out how to answer it, man. I guess the best way is to take you down a slight journey. It'll be quick, but a slight journey. At one point in life, no, I wasn't. And I'm gonna tell you why, right? Because I think I bought into the media and how they portrayed a lot of these killings. I said, I'm educated. I got a PhD.
Yeah.
I dress pretty decently.
Speak well.
I speak well. I know how to kind of navigate these spaces. And so in my mind, I'm like, they ain't gonna take me in because I'm not gonna give them a reason to. Man, as these cases keep coming up, as they keep popping up, I'm like, nah, like it doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. Like it doesn't matter. And I think, right, that is the part that, like, one, it was an awakening. Mm-hmm. Because now that I look back on it, I was very ignorant in my thought process around that. Two, right, I think what began to make me scared or a bit more hesitant about cops is when, one, I became more educated, and I started talking to some of my cop friends. Not because they were bad, but because my question to them was, okay, when you go into your briefings or when you have different conversations, what do you consider? What do they kind of talk about as being the typical criminal?
Yeah.
So you probably say somebody 6 feet, black, kind of big, wearing jeans or a t-shirt, some Jordans. You know, we profile people. And when I'm not in a suit or at work, I do like Jordans and I do like a t-shirt, and I like to. I'm from Atlanta, so I mean that's how I dress. That's how I kind of like. I kind of like to. So I'm like, well, one, they could kind of do it from that standpoint, but two, I realized that in the sense, the system is set up to go and find me, right? It's set up to look for somebody that looks like me, that moves like I move, that talks like I talk, that's from where I'm from, and right, depending on the situation, I could die.
Yeah.
And I think because of that, right, and I don't think it's so hard because you're like, every encounter with a cop, I want to say, you know, and I guess I'm struggling because I want to say no. I really do. I really want to say no, I'm not. But if I'm honest with you, every time I have an encounter with a cop, and they're in their suit and we're interacting, I'm nervous. My heart stops. My heart is probably racing a lot fast. I bet if we did a study, and I hate to be scholastical here, but in academia, but I bet if we did a study, right, just stress levels, heart,
Well, yeah.
blood pressure, all that, of a black person when they interact with a cop, without a shadow of a doubt, know that all of those stressors are up
Yeah.
for black people, and it's up.
Yeah.
I can't tell you that it's not. And once they leave my presence, or we leave doing, they leave interrogating me, bothering me, I let it down. I calm down and I gather myself and I say, I made it through another encounter.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if that answers your question, but the fact that I have to fear for, or that I fear for my life on most occasions when dealing with cops, and I would say that there is some fear there, right? And because even when I've done nothing wrong, when it's a traffic stop, right,
Mm-hmm.
just something simple is there. And so I don't. It's a hard question to answer.
Yeah.
I know all cops aren't bad. I know that they shouldn't be, but I also don't know who I'm gonna get.
Right. that, my friend, is a heavier statement than I think either of us really know. And I think that America can resonate with that question. Ma'Khia Bryant, she didn't know who she was going to get. And if I can, and I hope I'm not being unnecessarily philosophical, I don't even know if every cop knows what part of them will show up on a scene all the time. If I give law enforcement agents the benefit of just human consideration, we are complex. Humans are complex.
Yeah.
Like, we are composed of a variety of emotions, of thoughts. We catch a lot. We're taught a lot. We are products to a degree of our environment. There's genetic information. We have predispositions. Our experiences inform. We can't disconnect we can't disconnect everything from one incident. You and I are who we are in our professional lives and our family lives, et cetera, et cetera. So my point is, I give the benefit of just human consideration to any cop. You're a human being composed of a lot. When you come on the scene, your training notwithstanding, and we'll talk about training, your training notwithstanding, you're liable to be influenced by a bad day, right? You might have some conscious and or unconscious bias. You might be flat out prejudiced and racist, whether or not you'll say it, or maybe you do say it, right? So you might have an agenda, or you might think you are the most colorblind, post-racism, new mentality, new America person out there, and surprise yourself in a certain situation. I was telling Kyla, like, when I found out about Miss Bryant and I saw the video footage of the officer who shot her after the fact, I said, babe, he looked so shiftless. In other words, he looked like he was surprised that he was in this situation. Now, it was so complex because as a law enforcement agent, he didn't have to run or hide. They weren't coming to arrest him right away. So he was just standing there trying to control the environment. But you could tell based on his body language that his psyche was running. He was like, oh my goodness, I am the next name, next face potentially on a song that is all too familiar. And I wondered, Press, like, did he come with that as in his intention? Or was it something a little bit more horrific than that you don't have to come now with it as your agenda? See, that's the thing, right? I was doing some research on the history of policing in America. Just, where does the law enforcement structure come from, right? Yeah. And, a part of our history, our being America law enforcement, comes from slave patrolling.
Yep.
So there's a great deal of our history, and I'm not saying all of it, but a great deal of it is rooted in a historical intentionality. We are gathering together with weapons to go look for some Black people. Yeah. And so when I think about that question, am I afraid of the police? Like you, it's a question that's like, it's not that black and white. It's not yes or no. I think it's this. I am afraid more so of the unconscious impact of the historical underpinnings of policing in our nation. Like, I don't know if we actually process that, like, contextually speaking, this emerges from a ideology that targets Black people.
Yeah.
And have we gotten to a point?
And has laws and systems in place to do such, right? And to say it's okay and to justify.
You know what I mean? That's what I am fearful of. And I guess if we want to parse fear, I am not saying that I am embracing an unhealthy fear, kind of a fear that limits me from, being able to live life, to be able to walk in lanes towards joy, growing family. I'm not saying that, although I know that it can get there. I know people stay indoors because they don't want to run into the police officers, depending on where they live. I know people who this thing has been so traumatic that it has impaired their lifestyle, right? Or just their approach to life. But I do think that there are laws, there are policies, there are just repeated incidents that say, you know what, like you said, being educated, having doctoral degrees, working on mine, being married, thinking that our avatar is unlike anything that is like, no. Because the things you're referencing, that's not a part of the avatar. You are a Black man. You happen to be imposing, relatively speaking, in terms of stature. And I wouldn't even say we're imposing. I mean, we're kind of in the wide circle of average. You know what I mean? But still, no one sees us if you put 10 of us in a line and says, oh, this one's a pastor. That one's, we still get asked, do you play basketball? That says a lot of what you need to understand, right? So I think that's what I'm afraid of. And the other thing I'll say is this, and this is just illustration. I'm not trying to overstretch it to say, this is the police in illustration, but like around here in my neighborhood, every other house, every other apartment, owns a dog, and dogs are being walked all the time, right? And for whatever reason, man, in the Tidewater area, like at least in where I live, like everyone has a pit bull. I don't know why. Like that just seems to be the dog of choice. The exceptions are, other kinds of large dogs or your small dogs, toy dogs. But every other dog is some pit bull mix, right? Don't know why that is. So I think because it's so familiar that I am not afraid, when I see people walking their dogs. But there are a few of my neighbors who they are too comfortable with the way they have trained their dogs that they don't always have them on leashes. And I say to myself, it's not that I am afraid. That is, I'm not going outside. I can't walk past you and your dog going to the mailbox. My wife and I can't go out on a run or a nice afternoon walk. But I don't trust your dog, even when the dog's on a leash. I trust you holding that leash. So now that the leash is out of the equation, oh yes, I've got some concerns, right? Because this dog's mentality is different than my mentality. The way I think about my life, I can't trust that your dog thinks about my life like that. You might say, oh no, I think about your life, or he's good. I've seen it all, man. They said, no, it's okay. And I'm like, no, it's okay. I'll stay here while you go by. I'll stay behind my door, because for me, when mentalities are different, ideologies are different, when we're standing on two different foundations, then I'm concerned about what this interaction will lead to. You know what I mean? And I think that's more or less my mentality when it comes to it. So yeah. Yeah,
no, you're right. I'm of the mindset, I'm gonna stay out of your way, you stay out of my way.
Yeah.
I'm gonna call the cops really if it's life or death. If it's not life or death, I don't think I've ever called the cops before.
I don't think I have
either. If I ever will.
I don't think I've ever called them either.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever called the cops. And I guess even when you ask a question, I thought about it from not completely the perspective of a white person, but when I talk to white people, cops are my friends. I call cops all the time. I interact with cops. Cops are like, I'm like, no, if a cop is on the right, it's like the Good Samaritan. If I see the cop on the right side, I'm gonna cross the street and go to the left to keep my distance. I'm not going to actively seek or engage cops
Yeah.
because of just my upbringing, my understanding, and the history of profiling and just cops in general.
Yeah. I have a history book by historian Leon Litwack. The book is called Trouble in Mind, and I want to read an excerpt from this book. It's in the early pages. In fact, I think it's its introduction, as he is dealing with what he calls the chapters entitled baptisms. I think it's a very provocative chapter title, especially as integral as that word is in the religious setting, and then also in the religious setting in the Black community. But he's using it to talk about being baptized into an understanding of race relations in American history. And the first time a young Black person is baptized, made aware. And baptism symbolizes, in the faith community, it is a symbol of conversion, that I have embraced certain spiritual realities that will inform my life. Again, he is very thoughtfully and strategically using this term to say that these baptisms are like unintentional, but they still indoctrinate. And so he's talking about that. So the excerpt is on page 15, Trouble in Mind, Leon Litwack. He says, the perceived absence of legal redress or consequence compounded the impact of these initial encounters with white violence. That's how he defines baptism. A Black person's initial encounters with white violence. Boom, baptized. From the very outset of their lives, young Blacks came to learn that in the New South, the differences between justice and injustice, the law and lawlessness, were at best ambiguous, at worst senseless, so blurred as to be indistinct. The ways in which they experienced the courts and police power were hardly calculated to enhance their respect for the law or for the white man's sense of fair play. The very relationship Black people bore to protective agencies contrasted sharply with that of whites. This is your illustration. The way we interact, two different things.
Yeah.
Even as white children were inculcated with the image of the policeman as a friend and protector, Black children learned to fear him as the enemy. I thought that was very weighty. Now, he's locating this in the post-Reconstruction United States of America, post-Reconstruction, pre-Jim Crow. And as I read that, I said, man, I'm wondering if any of that is still at work. Now, I think in my heart of hearts, the idealist in me, and you know me, I tend to be more optimistic, or at least try to approach life like that. Even as I read this, and even as I maybe suggest that there might be some overtones that still have contemporary relevance, I'm like, man, do I want to use the term enemy? Like, is that moving in the wrong direction? What do you think, man? Is that like, okay, Rich, I get it. That's a good excerpt about the past. I don't know. Am I off in thinking like, man, but it still sounds very real? At least
definitely real. I would say they are an instrument. I won't necessarily flat out call them an enemy, right?
Say that again. You said they're an instrument?
To the enemy.
Okay.
I wouldn't flat out call them an enemy. And here's why, right? And I've heard people say, well, cops can't be good because of the system and what the system caused. And to a certain extent, I actually do agree with that. However, I've met enough, or I know enough cops that understand that being a cop is a people's job, right? And it boils down to like Talking with Strangers, the book by Malcolm Gladwell, and he kind of gets into this. If you take an approach where you are not the law, but you help maintain law and order, then I think your approach to people are different. If you are the law, then you are the enemy. If you're here just to maintain law and order, I won't necessarily call you an enemy, but I will say you can be a tool for the enemy. Wow. And so, and I'm saying that, right, because here's a good example. the tool is going to say, or the enemy is going to say, hey, Black people are using weed, and they're smoking weed and doing all of the above. But research has shown that white and Black people use it at the same rate, the same level. So being a tool for the enemy goes, well, I'm going to go and police the Black neighborhoods because that's where we've decided where all the weed is. Well, no, you only know the weed is there because you continue to patrol this area heavily. If you patrol the white areas equally as heavily, you would know that it's just as prevalent in their community as it is in the Black community, right? Or to a certain extent, you can go, hey, this person is smoking weed, and a police officer might come up and say, hey, I smell it. They'll be like, you know what? This isn't that big of a deal. Most places are starting to legalize it. Now, because I am an officer, I'm going to tell you to put it out, and then I'm going to go about my business.
Yeah.
Like, it's one thing to smoke it, and it's another thing to distribute it, right? And I think that's how we look at it. Or here's an even better example. Let's even take weed off the equation. Mm-hmm. Let's take the whole opioid epidemic.
Right.
So how does it? Well, one, it wasn't even an epidemic when it was in the Black community. It was we're savages. We can't control ourselves. We're reckless. We need to be put behind bars, and cops help with that. A tool of the enemy. Mm-hmm. Now the enemy is saying, oh, this is in the white neighborhoods. This is an epidemic. We can't put these people in jail. We have to really help them out. And we have to find, some solutions to help them. Like now it's a problem. Whereas when it was in the Black community, and might I add, but we won't get into this either, when the government put in the Black community, but that's another conversation for another day. It was, we had the issue, but now when it enters into the white communities, it's a problem. Same with like crack cocaine, how we separate the two. One is a felony, the other is like a small little misdemeanor, different sentence times. And the new Jim Crow kind of really gets into it. And I think the new Jim Crow really breaks down how it can be a tool of the enemy. But I think, or it's my belief, when cops understand people, relationships, and are policing their own community, I'm going to try to give them the benefit of the doubt and say that they're going to approach it a little different.